So it is now my pleasure to introduce our second keynote speaker of the day. She is currently the co-founder and managing director of B-Thread, a platform of solutions based on behavioral science insights designed to drive organizational, group, and individual level change. And she is an influencer in the field of organizational behavior, where she has conducted extensive research on processes of culture change, ethical risk, decision-making bias, and self-regulation. And we're pleased that she is here today to discuss the potential dark side of innovation and how we can potentially safeguard our decision-making. So please join me in welcoming Caterina Bulgarella.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Imagine I ask a small group of people to create a circle and to start playing ball. It's 3 people wearing a white shirt, the white team, and 3 people wearing a yellow shirt, the yellow team. The 6 players form a circle and they start passing the ball around. Easy and simple. After a while, I go back to them and I ask them to do something else. In addition to playing ball, they must count the passes of the players on the other team. So what was a straightforward and simple task becomes somewhat demanding. And now each player must pay closer attention. A gorilla steps into the room. It's a gorilla, it's a fairly bulky and highly visible presence. You can try to picture it. Should you wonder, it's not a real gorilla, it's a big guy wearing a gorilla costume. So the gorilla steps into the room and walks toward the circle of players. In fact, the gorilla walks through the circle, and the question is, how many players to see the gorilla? You might think it's a silly question because the gorilla is such a salient presence in the room, but in fact this was the question that 2 scientists, Chabris and Simons, wanted to answer as they tested people's attentional capacity. It turns out what they found was pretty stunning. 50% of people would not see the gorilla, which means every single time we apply ourselves to a somewhat demanding task or project. Say somebody puts an idea, a big proposal on your desk, and you start combing through every single chart and number in that proposal. Well, every single time we start paying close attention, there is a 50% chance we're not going to see the gorilla standing in front of us. Something truly huge, just is looking at us in the eye. To be honest with you, when we undertake fairly demanding and complex work as any type of just complex project, such as any initiative that has to do with innovation, it's not just our bounded attentional capacity to pose a challenge, it's also our ability to make good impartial decisions. Particularly if we're talking about decisions that have ethical implications, which is always the case when we work on innovation. It turns out that ethical decision-making and ethical behavior represents a domain of human behavior, particularly rife with contradiction and paradox, starting with the fact that people have a stunningly high self-confidence in their own ethics and moral compass, right? You think that when we face an ethical challenge, an ethical issue, we'd be in a sort of philosophical quandary, but it turns out that might not be really the case. If you don't believe me, go and ask whoever you want. Go to even the most controversial person in your network and ask them if they think they're ethical, trustworthy, honest. Nearly everybody will look at you in a sort of, they will be annoyed by your question. They will tell you, why are you even asking me that question? Of course I'm ethical. Of course I'm trustworthy and honest. And if you keep talking with them, Well, they'll tell you either explicitly or in between the lines that they are more ethical than anybody else. It's been observed again and again. But it turns out that just cheating and unethical conduct are not as rare as we like them to be. In fact, they're pretty common. So take, just think about our bounded attentional capacity and ethicality as the two baseline conditions we bring into the work of innovation. We know the work to be extremely complex and demanding. We know the work to be full of dilemmas and trade-offs. And we are going to be likely to face a number of challenges and risks. In fact, we'll be facing a number of very specific risks. Take creativity, one of the key ingredients of innovation. Well, creativity is also a condition that makes people more likely to cheat. Research shows that people who are dispositionally creative are more likely to engage in unethical behavior than people who are not. In fact, dispositional creativity is a better predictor of cheating than IQ. And this is not just an issue. For people who are creative. It's an issue for everybody because it takes as little as being primed with creativity or being put on a task where your divergent thinking is being triggered. Say I ask a group of people to work on a brainstorming task, right? I give them instructions to do so. That will make them more likely to come up with a novel idea. But as soon as their divergent thinking is triggered, they're going to be also in a state of mind that makes them more capable to revisit the truth, to take a fresh look at rules and principles, right? To reinterpret things that we think are well understood. And it turns out that only two things are needed for people to become, sadly, significantly likely to make a poor ethical decision. Number one, we must experience a conflict of interest. My personal interest is at odds with somebody else's best interest. So if this is true, the chances that I will make a poor ethical decision will go up significantly. And if I can come up with a rationale, an argument to justify the conduct I'm contemplating, if I can do that, well, the chances of me cheating really go through the roof at that point. So if I'm in a creative state of mind, the ability to play with the truth, whether it's right or wrong, is going to make it incredibly easy for me to come up with that rationale. One of the key challenges that we face when it comes to innovation has to do, paradoxically, I would say, with the fact that innovation, by and large, is associated with the pursuit of good, right? Even culturally, when we think about innovation, we are thinking about something that is positive. It's about making progress. It's about knocking down barriers. If you think about innovation in the healthcare sector, it's about saving people's lives. The thing is that whenever we associate ourselves with the pursuit of good, which is something that all of us should want, well, that has a counterintuitive effect on our ethical posture. You see, people go through life with a sort of mental balance sheet to keep track of their morals. So if I do a good deed today, say I help an old man cross the street, here goes a check mark next to goodness, right? I just, I've done a good deed. And so I'm patting myself on the back. It's non-conscious. But in addition to patting myself on the back, and there is nothing wrong with that, something else is happening. I'm freeing up my want self, the part of me that is very self-interested and not at all, concerned with the best interest of other people. So I'm going to be in a position to make poor ethical decisions. Just to tell you how tricky the pursuit of good can be, there is evidence that shows that pursuing good can give cover to unethical conduct. So in a study in which people were asked to play a game of dice for money, and the game was set up so that people could cheat liberally, it was found that most people would cheat, which is always what happens when people are given the opportunity to cheat. People, by and large, will cheat at least some. But the interesting thing is that after the game, people were asked to go through a polygraph test. And lo and behold, most people who had cheated also lied on the polygraph test. Yes, and they lied, and but the polygraph could pick on the fact that they were lying, because there was like the normal bodily change that you see when people tell a lie. What was really intriguing in this study had to do with a group of people who were told up front, whatever money you make on the game of dice, that money is going to go to a charity. It's going to benefit a charity. Well, these people, they cheated all the same, they lied all the same, but the polygraph could not detect anything as they were lying. As if, just having cheated and lied on behalf of a good cause was making that behavior completely acceptable. The one thing I want you to keep in mind is that it's very difficult not to care about what we care about. So the moment we attach ourselves to an important goal or project, such as anything that may put us in the position to deliver, let's say, breakthrough discovery, well, we're going to care. And we're going to work hard to make sure that project, that vision is successful. All the work, all the commitment that we pour into what we're doing is going to fill up whatever attentional capacity we have, and other things, including ethical concerns, will fade in the background, right? You may think of these other things as the metaphorical gorilla in the room that we may not see. So we'll be biased in the way we weigh information, we will be biased in the way we sort through facts, and we will also be biased in the way we look at the behavior of the people around us, particularly if these people can help us achieve the goals we're working so hard to achieve. So if these people end up engaging in some type of unethical behavior, we may either literally or metaphorically, we may look the other way. All these biases, all these blind spots lead to ethical failure. There are plenty of examples. Every other day there is a story in the news about this corporate scandal or that corporate scandal. And when we start looking into these stories, we see these blind spots really playing a key role. Take the Theranos downfall, right? The biotech startup that only a few years ago was valued at $9 billion until it failed miserably. What's intriguing about the Theranos story is not just the alleged out-of-control behavior of its founder, Elizabeth Holmes. It's the fact that so many well-meaning and highly seasoned stakeholders ended up entangled in this story just because they bought into vision of a new technology that could, supposedly make the difference for a lot of people and for their health. So if we look into the Theranos story, we see every single bias I described today really playing a gigantic role. Think about a Theranos vision, a boundless vision, and how that vision turned into a very narrow set of goals and priorities. Soon enough, for Theranos, it was no longer about making progress toward the objective of giving people greater control over their health. It just became about developing a product, the microlab that Holmes had imagined. It became as narrow as that. If you look at their mission, well, it's highly inspiring mission. It's easy to see how that mission inspired many and made it difficult for them to contemplate the possibility that Theranos was lying, that it was not making the type of progress they were claiming. And if you look at the breakthrough nature of the innovation Theranos was pursuing, right, it's also easy to see how the very breakthrough nature of that innovation soon enough became the argument as to why Theranos could take shortcuts. What we are doing is so novel, is so unique, it's never been done before. So there are no processes and procedures that can really apply. Theranos, in essence, was putting itself on a slippery slope. But let me tell you, when you put yourself on a slippery slope, there is only one way to go, and that is downward, unfortunately. So I always say that these biases, these blind spots, apply to everybody. Nobody is exempt. It takes a lot of work to be somewhat exempt. But I also say we should be just especially concerned about them if we are operating in environments with additional pressure points. For example, if we are pursuing innovation in an industry in which innovation has almost an existential value, take the tech sector, and for that matter, in some respects, also the healthcare sector. Or if we are operating in an environment with an intense competitive pressure, think about the 737 Air Max, that failure, that disaster, and the pressure Boeing was facing to catch up to Airbus as they rated the 737 Air Max for commercial release. So is there anything we can do to address these biases and the risks associated with them? I know I haven't been too encouraging, but we're talking about a unique type of blindness, being blind to the fact that we are blind. So there is only one thing that that can mitigate that type of blindness, and that is better and greater insight, which we can bring about across a number of domains, starting with independent review processes and independent reviewers. We should want both to be completely unaffected by any type of conflict of interest. Because let me tell you, there is no amount of expertise or experience that can make up for a conflict of interest. From a policy-making standpoint, that should translate in a very specific and comprehensive guidance as to what a conflict of interest entails, the many forms it can take, the subtle effects it can have on decision making, and the resources, safeguards, mechanisms that both independent review processes and independent reviewers should rely on to carry out their responsibilities in an appropriate and effective way. If we look at the organizations that undertake the difficult work of innovation, we should want these organizations to also take a hard look at their internal culture. In fact, we should expect these companies and businesses to measure their culture systematically, because that is the only way to surface the conduct risks I described today. Finally, we need a better and stronger speak-out culture in business and around business. And again, from a policy-making standpoint, that translates into very assertive and specific guidance as to the type of enablers, mechanisms, and resources that organizations and other stakeholders should provide so that people feel comfortable exercising their voice, especially their ethical voice. So if 50% of the times there's always a chance that we may not see the gorilla standing in front of us, as we do the hard work of innovation, after we take a close look at what we can see, which is probably what we already know, there is one question we must ask and answer. Is there anything that we are not seeing? Is there a gorilla in the room? And if there is, what is it? And why can we see it? Thank you very much.